All right, welcome to Unsupervised Learning. This is Daniel Miesler, and I'm happy to have Matt Muller here from Times.
It's a pleasure to be here, Daniel.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. I've heard so much about the company and happy to hear more about what it's actually about, what problem you're trying to solve. I really like to start there with the problem. What do you see as being the problem around, I would say, security in general, but also how are security problems being magnified by AI stuff?
Yeah, so I'll maybe start with the original problem that our founders were trying to solve. They were security operations professionals who had, done security work at companies like DocuSign and at eBay, some other large places, and they were extraordinarily frustrated by the just a sheer amount of manual labor involved in actually responding to security incidents, right? Like if you think about what a traditional security operations center or SOC does, they receive an alert, they have to go research that alert in a whole bunch of different places, and take a number of manual steps just to decide if that's a true positive, right? They have to do work just to decide if they have to do work, which is an enormously frustrating place to be. And so they were looking out on the market for some kind of automation tool that could help them ease that burden. And not seeing one that they wanted, they ended up building Tines, and starting out sort of first and foremost as this tool to solve a lot of the SOC problems around inefficient alert management and burnout and all those sorts of things. And what we've discovered over time, which I think has been really cool, is that the SOC is not the only team in cybersecurity that needs automation. Right? Turns out there's inefficiencies everywhere. Another really fascinating thing that we've learned over the years is that automation is actually a lot easier than I think a lot of people give it credit, right? Like a lot of traditional automation tools required learning Python, learning coding languages, having very, very deep systems knowledge in order to be able to get automation done. And so with the rise of AI, what we're seeing is, people that have automation ideas, right? Like I think if you ask almost anyone, they have ideas about how they can make their
Yeah.
job easier, right? They just haven't in the past necessarily been able to express that. And now with tools like AI, like no code workflow builders, these folks are able to build those automations like they haven't before. So yeah, I would say the pain point that Tines has been trying to solve is everybody who has ever had to push a file from point A to point B manually has a pain that Tines is trying to solve.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, one way I've been thinking about this is like, what would you do with 5 times more staff?
Right.
Right. So it's like we know what we want to do. We're constrained by how many eyes and hands that we actually have and brains, right? So, I mean, all these things could be done manually. The question is, do you have the people to do it? Do you have the people to create the automations to do it? And it just seems like I'm a big fan of theory of constraints, and the constraint
Mm.
is usually people and time that they have to focus on these problems.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that we're also learning as well, and this is where AI has been such a fascinating new addition, is that it's constraint around knowledge as well. And like, even if you have all the people that you want, security teams have just such a fractured ecosystem that they're responsible for protecting, and it's virtually impossible to become an expert in every single system that you're
Hmm.
responsible for, right? And so, again, what we see is these people that are experts, they free up all this time. Great. Maybe I know exactly what I want to do in AWS, but we just acquired a company that has a GCP environment, and now I have to learn an entirely new, different cloud provider, right? And I'm just not going to be as good in that.
Yeah.
And that's where I think AI tooling has been really, really helpful to make that context switching less of a cognitive load for people.
Hmm. Yeah. One thing I'm worried about is this addition of staff to attacker teams,
Hmm.
right? So if you have an attacker team, let's say it's 100 people, and 5 of the people are like really, really good and really dangerous. What happens when AI tooling or automation or agents or whatever it is turns that into like 30 or 50 of the best people? and it turns the other like 80 into like 800. And this is what I think the agents are actually going to do for both us as defenders, but more importantly, attackers. So the time that it would have taken them to find our mistake goes from like days or hours to like maybe minutes. And so we have to be doing something on the defense side to counter that.
Absolutely. And for me, it's been interesting watching how attackers have been thinking about AI. Sophos actually just published a report recently with some analysis around how attackers are using AI. And if you look back a couple years, there were a lot of headlines that I think, they were valid at the time, right? We just didn't know what generative AI was truly capable of.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of concern that AI was going to invent all these brand new kinds of attacks. And that
Right.
really hasn't happened, right? Instead, what we're seeing is attackers are using AI much the same way defenders are. Hey, make my email sound a little better, right?
Yeah.
And make my phishing page, generate 14 different varieties of landing page for me. And so, where we're seeing attackers start to use AI a lot more, to your point, is increasing their velocity, right?
Yeah.
And so, to my mind, again, we're as defenders, there's only so much time and attention that you can afford to put into problems. Let's not worry about types of attacks that haven't been invented yet, right? Let's worry about the ones
Yeah.
that are occurring today and how those are evolving. Our security teams can really build defenses against attacks that don't exist yet. But we
Yeah.
can sort of see how those attacks are becoming faster, right? How the translations are becoming better and better, and so the bar for fooling our employees is getting lower. It means we need to be able to react faster. We need to be able to react in a more we need to be able to adapt a little bit better, right? Like we can't just apply rigid playbooks to every single security scenario. And so to me, it's a little bit of an AI arms race.
Yeah.
And I think for us as defenders, in my view, applying AI in the places where attackers are also applying it, that seems to make the most sense, at least today, right? With today's models. And that answer
Yeah.
could change in 3 days, right? When some new foundation model gets released that changes the game. But at least with today's models, I think that's where I sort of see things evolving right now.
Yeah. I really love this point that you're making, because the reality is, and it actually goes to pre-AI as well. It's like, are you going to hire this super hacker person who's going to like all these new techniques and new ideas and advanced attacks? And like the day-to-day job of like a CISO or the day-to-day job of a defender is so nuts and bolts. It's
Right.
like, is a log being generated? For step one,
Right.
can we even, like, if you take like a bunch of MITRE attacks, can we even know if this attack is being waged against us? Do we have any sort of detection capability, right? That's one question. And then the question is like, is that log going anywhere where someone could potentially see it? A system or a person or anything like that. Okay, that's cool. That's a nice second level. Is anyone actually looking at it? Okay, that's 3. And 3 doesn't even guarantee what you need, which is, are they going to do something about it? And like these basic workflows are like everything. And if you look at like a CISO's job, it's managing the budget. It's managing this basic workflow of like logs and processing and, workflows coming through the security operations. And it's politics and stuff like that. And it's like, it's not hacker movies. It's really just these fundamentals that we have to do more consistently and at scale. So I really like that point. What do you see as like the biggest challenges for CISOs right now?
Yeah, I mean, for CISOs right now, I think there are two halves to the challenge. The first is securing AI for their enterprises, and the second one is how to apply AI for security.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the first problem, it's been really interesting to see the CISO role evolve from sort of a self-acknowledged, the team of no,
Yeah.
to really trying to enable the business. We definitely saw, when for like Chat GPT first launched, for example, there was some team of no mentality there, right? And what
Yes.
happened? Every single employee just worked around the constraints that the
Yep.
security team tried to throw up. And so now what we see are CISOs starting to, I think the CISOs that I see that are least stressed about AI are the ones that have, started to adopt frameworks around usage, right? Helping, not just setting barriers for their organization, but working with them to understand, like, hey, what are the risks that we're taking on, right? And like, honestly, even just showing where AI doesn't necessarily succeed as well today, right? It's not saying no, you can't use it. It's actually working to demonstrate, like, okay, this use case seems interesting, but may not actually be the most helpful output, right? We're actually, if we have a chatbot, can it be fooled into giving away free airline tickets, for example, right?
Yeah.
And will that be held up in court? Answer is yes. So, I think when it comes to securing AI for the business, it's been actually almost a little bit refreshing to see CISOs adapting more quickly, I think, than they have to other technology stacks, and sort of saying like, hey, this is our next big frontier chance to serve as a trusted advisor to the business, right? Like we
Sure.
can reset a little bit on some of the other technology shifts, and just say like, right, we're now helping the business, and helping the business understand what and when and where it wants to take on risk. Um, when it comes to applying security within, or applying AI within the security organization, that's where I think there's going to be a very interesting balance. One of the things that we're starting to hear now is that boards are mandating that teams within an organization figure out how to use AI. And, when it comes to cybersecurity defense, AI is useful for a lot of different scenarios, but not necessarily every scenario, right? You have to balance the fact it's, I sort of, if you're building the plane while flying it, you have to make sure a wing doesn't fall off when
Sure.
you're adding a different technology, right? And so I think for CISOs who are adapting AI for cybersecurity defense, I think that's going to be a really interesting sort of balance to strike of saying, yes, we need to go experiment with AI. We need to go figure out where it's useful for us, but also recognize that the consequences, if AI fails for defense, it may be a little higher stakes, right? Because now we're talking about actual, like, data protection, right, and potential data breach issues. And so I do think that the CISOs have their work cut out for them, in that regard, when they have to go be the ones that are applying and using AI versus setting guidelines for other teams.
Sure. Absolutely. So why do you think boards are pushing companies to adopt AI?
I think it's sort of in a lot of ways, boards have always pushed companies to be more efficient, right? To make sure
Mm.
that they're maximizing the effectiveness of their team. No board of directors is going to say, it looks like you have a pretty bloated workforce that really isn't doing much. That's fine,
Right.
right? And now there's a new tool at hand, right, which has a lot of promise to displace some of the grunt work that teams have to do. Um, Again, I don't think most people at this point are seriously contemplating replacing the bulk of their staff with AI.
Yeah.
It's a fear that certainly has been heard and talked about a lot, but I think the reality is the focus now is, hey, give your team access to these tools. See what they can do, right? See if they can increase their own efficiency here. And so, to me, what this translates to is we will ultimately be more effective as a business, not necessarily by replacing our staff, but by making it so that their individual productivity extends a little bit further, right? Another lens of this is we know that the business of doing business inherently involves a lot of toil. What would
Hmm.
our designers, what would our security professionals, what would our HR people be doing if they weren't just, sort of doing daily document processing tasks, right? Like, what
Exactly.
creativity could we unlock for the organization? So I think it's fair, honestly, for boards to push companies on these things.
Yeah.
I think the only failure mode is if they say you must adopt AI, no exceptions, even if you find a use case that today's models aren't necessarily ready for yet, right? Like that could be
Yeah.
the only danger there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is there's probably some push as well that says just get it into products so we can market it because
Right.
everyone else is talking about it. But I think it's probably like, I don't know, 75-25 in the direction of like find efficiencies, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely the early days of AI adoption, I think was a lot more, this model of, and now we have AI, right? Like, well, for what? You just kind of added a
Right.
wrapper around around a chatbot.
Right.
And for us at times, as we were thinking about adding AI into our product, I mean, we started out as a no code workflow builder. We took a look at some of the early AI pushes, and we ended up with something like 50 failed experiments to integrate AI into our platform, because we didn't just want it to be yet another chatbot, right? That looks cool as demoware, but
Right.
doesn't actually add any value for anybody.
Yeah.
It requires some thoughtfulness to make sure that you can't just slap AI on something and say, "Oh, great, this is now a better product," right? Like, it actually requires deep thought and integration to make AI useful.
Yeah. And that's a great transition. We've set a pretty good baseline here for what's happening in industry. So for the problems that we talked about, difficulty of automation, basically a constraints on work that could be done by security teams because of just the size of the team and the stuff they're working on. So how is Tyne specifically addressing these?
Yeah, we're addressing it through a couple different layers. The first is recognizing that just about every single security team has a different adoption maturity level when it comes to AI, and also different constraints. And so our number one design principle was, don't be prescriptive in how people use AI within your platform. And so one of the very first integrations we built was we called it an automatic transform. And basically what this was is, in a lot of what people use Tyne's workflows for is to take data from one system, transform or manipulate it in some way, and then move it into another system automatically. And if you don't want to learn the necessary, like all the ins and outs of some arcane like JSON schema, it
Hmm.
turns out AI is actually really good at understand. Given a JSON input, you tell AI, I would like to extract these 4 fields, transform the data in this way, and then output it in this format. And so so one of the first integrations we built was this automatic transform where AI would actually generate Python. So now your workflow, it still looks like the same, deterministic workflow that you built by hand before, but now you've got one additional piece here that you didn't have to build by hand. You're
Mm.
still having, Python is deterministic, right? If you give the same input to a function, it'll produce the same output. So we balanced the kind of what we saw as the best of both worlds there, where yes, you don't have to write that Python. You don't even have to know like what Python does. You just need to validate that when you put the input in, you get the output that you expect. And so, for teams that are sort of nervous about integrating AI, or maybe really early in their maturity journey, we wanted to give them a first step, right? Something that had a lot of guardrails on it, that was safe to play around with.
Hmm.
We also have the ability to just integrate a straight up AI prompt into your workflows as well. Where if you're maybe more comfortable with prompt engineering, or using those sorts of things, you could actually then go give it almost any input you wanted and get any output you wanted, structured, unstructured, so on and so forth.
Mm.
And then more recently, we launched a tool called Workbench. And Workbench is basically our way of addressing the fact that most chat tools are their best when they have access to your data, right?
Yeah.
There's this inherent tension between sending your most sensitive business contextual information to a third party vendor, and also making sure that AI is useful for you. So when we launched Workbench, we made sure that the AI models that we were using were actually completely private to the Tynes tenant that was running them. Right, there was no logging of the data, there was no sending the data across the internet, and it enabled teams that had previously had constraints around sending data to third parties be able to say, "Oh, right." Now I can actually connect my AI models to the tools that I use in a way that's safe, in a way that complies with my policies, and now we can finally take advantage of that true combination, like that ideal combination of large language models that have the context, that have the business data, and feel good about it.
Nice. And what were the types of operations that they were doing with those prompts and LLMs? Was that data transforms? Was that analysis benign or malicious? That type of stuff?
Yeah, I think one of the big use cases that people often start out with is around phishing analysis. The phishing ecosystem, if you will, has evolved a lot over the years. Where you used to be able to check for things like a suspicious link or suspicious IP address or malicious attachment in an email, and that told you whether or not it was phishing. Nowadays, business email compromise is one of the biggest attack vectors that we see. And
Hmm.
often it's simply, somebody impersonating your CEO or impersonating somebody at your organization. And, I get these all the time from the Times CEO, allegedly, right? Saying, hey, Matt,
Right.
it is me, your CEO. Please provide your phone number to me, right? And they're looking for additional context there. And it turns out that it's a really hard problem for traditional tools to be able to solve. A human can look at that message and sort of instinctively understand that this is phishing, right? Your tier one SOC analyst can look at that and be like, oh, right, that's obviously not the CEO. But how
Right.
do you explain that to code, right? How do you explain that to a very strict workflow tool? Because asking for a phone number is something people do all the time, right? It's the
Sure.
context of this conversation that results in that not being, it results in it being malicious versus benign. And large language models, of course, are pretty darn good at understanding
Yeah.
intent, understanding the nuances of some of those things. And so for security operations teams that would get reports of phishing that they would have to go analyze, there was a certain bulk of them that had to be done by humans just because like the rules that they set just couldn't catch them, particularly in the BEC case. And so now what we're seeing is, these AI analysis tools are being able to, you can use them for a verdict, or you can just say, hey, I actually want you to extract the intent of this message. And I'll combine that with some other signals that I have, right? Like mix and match AI and, maybe a threat research, a threat intelligence database that I have to say, oh, this sender is actually in our database as being potentially risky. Combine that with the intent of this message being asking for contact information, and now you instantly have not just a yes, this is malicious verdict. You also have insight into the intent of the threat actor, right? And with Workbench in particular, this is where analysts can now iterate on that, right? And going back to like, what would you do with the additional time that you can
Yeah.
save? Now they're able to pivot into additional investigation, right? And say, okay, if I know this was the attacker's intent, what else can I learn about the attacker? What else would this attack look like, right?
Hmm.
Maybe we received this one report. What would it look like if it had succeeded with a different user, right? And can I go investigate that now? So much less time spent on triage, more time actually spent asking the questions of like, who is attacking me? What can I do about it? How do we know that we're safe, right? And
Yeah.
moving beyond to the things that actually require some human thought and creativity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, something you said earlier was really interesting. You're talking about data transforms. And like
Mm.
I spent a lot of time at different companies dealing with this. It seems like it's not just um augmentation with stuff that humans were doing that Tines could help with, but also things that like data pipelines. And I was also thinking about and you probably aren't like you got to focus when you're a product, you got to focus, but quality checks and
Right.
security checks, you kind of have the same sort of vibe. You have things coming in and you're moving through a set of steps for checking, for validation, for quality, for whatever you could do. And if you add AI to that, you could have like judgment in there at any of those steps. So, I mean, um, it seems like you're very much focused on security, but are you seeing people use it for more like broad use cases like quality and stuff like that? Because I mean, this is everywhere in IT. It's everywhere in business. This is just business in general needs these sort of workflows at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it feels like almost every problem boils down to either case management or data management, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
especially in the data management world, you're exactly right. This is where we can use Tines, and we see customers using Tines to remove some of the toil and burden off of just managing those pipelines. Everything from hey, what do we expect this log source to be like producing, right? Like, do we actually AWS loves to subtly change the shape of CloudTrail logs.
Totally.
Right? And there's no big announcement. It's just one of these days I've noticed that a fewer of my logs are getting classified correctly, right? And like, why is that?
Yeah.
And so that's where Tines and AI implementation within Tines can serve as that sanity check. We also see customers using Tines to integrate with some of their other data management platforms, particularly around hot and cold data stacks, right? And like
Mm.
in the context of doing, for example, a security investigation, you may only have 30 days worth of logs that are like hot, right, and like
Yeah.
actively accessible. And you have all the rest in Amazon S3, and you need to be able to pull them. This is something where Tines can help make that retrieval process and rehydration process a lot more simple. And so yeah, we're absolutely seeing people using Tines as sort of the meta orchestration and monitoring layer on top of these data pipelines that they're building, because at the end of the day, there's the number of people that have data pipelines that don't have a data engineering team is a lot larger than
Yes.
the teams that do, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And as far as like AI and security wise, what are the main use cases that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, AI is, what we're seeing used a lot is, again, sort of either, extracting context.
Hmm.
We see threat intelligence teams are using AI in a couple different really interesting ways around reporting. The first is, when you consume threat intelligence reporting that has been produced by another organization, being able to extract indicators and all that sort of stuff. But then when you are actually producing reporting, there's a lot of different consumers of that, some of whom are human and want a PDF, and some of whom are computers and can't
Mm.
read a PDF, right? And so being able to use these capabilities to produce multiple different kinds of intelligence distribution,
Mm.
I think has been a really, like, to me, that was sort of an unexpected but really fascinating use case to see. Of like, oh right, it's not just about reading data, right? It's about producing the data that are translation of data, really,
Yeah.
for the right audience.
So
And
you have like
ultimately,
a little piece of useful intelligence, and you have, yeah, I did a lot of work on this at Apple actually with the threat intel team. They have this little nugget of intelligence, and their customers are like whatever 19 different customers, including like global security, which is physical security. And then you have all these different product teams and software teams, and they all care about something different.
right.
And that's a workflow combined with AI that you could just produce those 19 different artifacts.
Right. Exactly, right? The CISO just wants to know basically, are we vulnerable? Have we been hit? Right? And
Right.
that's about it. And the SOC may want to know a little bit more technical detail and so on and so forth. So yeah, that to me that has been a really fascinating use case of it's avoiding toil, but not in the way that everyone thinks, right? Like, you still as the human are putting your creativity into this report and developing the nuance and understanding, and then AI is helping you translate that into a different context.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is Workbench the main thing that you guys are working on and talking about right now? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Workbench is definitely something that has really taken off in our customer base. And again, I think a lot of that is the fact that, a chat tool is a chat tool, right? There's a lot of those out there in the world. But what Tines provides is that private and secure access and the context and integration with all of your other data, and most importantly, your other Tines workflows. And so the way we're seeing people now start to use Workbench is sort of almost like dipping in and out of using deterministic automation, and also using a chat interface for their analyst. So in an incident, an analyst may go into Workbench and say, I received this alert. Please analyze it, recommend some next steps for me, right? And one of those next steps might be, this account looks like it's been compromised. You should probably lock this account. And you say, okay, great. Workbench allows you to trigger other workflows that have been built within Tines. And so I don't have to worry about AI maybe hallucinating the endpoint of our identity provider, right? Or mistaking, like if there's a bunch of other people in Tines named Matt. I don't have to worry that it's going to grab the wrong Matt, right? Like I can actually delegate that task to a deterministic workflow. And then it comes back to
Oh,
Workbench,
that's
right?
great. That's great.
Um, and Workbench says, great, we've done that part. Here's, would you like me to write up an incident summary, right? And you can close out this case. And so really giving people, a much more explicit way of working through common tasks, delegating to automation where necessary. But this is still very much, a sort of a co-pilot sort of use case. One of the things we're really excited about right now is some of the agentic AI capabilities that
Hmm.
we're starting to see some people using Tines for sort of basic agentic AI stuff. And in the same way that we didn't necessarily want to rush and be the first people to integrate a chat interface just to say we had AI, agentic AI I think has had maybe an evolution in terms of our understanding of what an AI agent actually is, right? And what constitutes agentic AI and so on and so forth. And now that these have more stable definitions, we're investing in figuring out what agentic AI looks like when it comes to Tines as well. So that's something that we're starting to get some internal sneak peeks on, and it's pretty exciting.
All right. Could you possibly show us a demo of Workbench?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be delighted to. Let's see. Hopefully, I have the correct screen pulled up here. But this is the Workbench interface, and you can see here, it's a fairly classic chat interface. And if you treat it just like any other chatbot, you'll get fairly generic LLM answers. So in my previous role, I worked in security operations at Coinbase,
Mm.
and we dealt with phishing all the time. We dealt with incidents, and got attacked all the time. So let's imagine here that I have received reports that the domain coinbase-sso.com is phishing, and I'm looking to learn more. Can you tell me if coinbase-sso.com is phishing? And it'll think for a second, but you'll notice here that because we are only talking to the LLM, it gives us a fairly generic answer, right? I don't have any specific information. And
Yeah,
so,
because this has got a training cutoff date, right? This is like it. It only knows so much. It's not an expert on domain names.
exactly, exactly. And, this is good generic advice, right? Like you should always check to see if it's an
Yeah.
official Coinbase domain. But as I start connecting tools, things can get a little bit more interesting. So now if I ask it the same question, if coinbase.so.com is phishing, it's going to look a little bit different, right? It knows that one of the tools available to it is URL scan. And so now, rather than just giving me a generic answer, it's actually going to use URL scan. And because it's searched for URL scan and found a result, it actually knows to then retrieve that result as well. It's kicking these things off automatically because these are read-only actions, right? Like no system is going to change because because it called these tools. We also have the ability, if there's a write action or a potentially destructive action, it'll ask you to confirm before it takes that action. But these are read only, right? And so now that we've pulled back some URL scan results, we can officially confirm that this is a phishing site, right? With the most up-to-date data. And if you've been on urlscan.com, you know that there's a lot of data that they pull back.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of provides this very quick insight into URL scan. And so, this is something where, security teams in the past, if they wanted to use all of these different tools, they had kind of one of two choices. They could either have a lot of different panes of glass open, or they could, sort of do like a one-time enrichment into, a case that came in, right?
Yeah.
I may not know ahead of time what tool I want to use in order to investigate something. And so what Workbench lets us do is say, okay, now, we can pick some of the tools that are, tools that are at our disposal, get the latest data, and ultimately get that sort of much more dynamic interface without ever having to leave Workbench.
Yeah, they just ask the question the normal way. They don't think about the tools that would be required to answer it correctly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And let's imagine that we're not using URL scan, we're using a different service provider
Sure.
to analyze phishing. I don't have to know anything about that service provider, right? Like all I have to know is what information the AI has extracted in order to be able to make that determination. And so for us, this is, again, sort of feels like one of the best of both worlds when it comes to chat assistants, right? Like you can get the validated data from the latest trusted data sources. You don't have to know any of the technical details behind it. You remain in full control over what sources are connected, when actions are taken, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, it just sort of removes that cognitive burden of having to, context switch between a bunch of different systems.
Yeah, that makes sense. I really liked what you were saying before when you were talking about building the workflows,
Mm.
um, where you seamlessly pivoting between when you need intelligence and when you need the consistency of like a legacy, or what did you call it? Deterministic system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's really, really important because when you talk about scale, you talk about processing terabytes of data. That's not an LLM thing,
Right.
right? You gotta pivot to traditional tech there. I thought that was really interesting. Well,
Yeah.
this is awesome. What else is coming out? What else should people know about that you're either have out now or releasing soon?
Yeah, some of the stuff coming out soon. We're adding a lot more into Workbench, and right now a lot of this interface is text based. We've heard a lot of requests from our customers that they'd like to be able to do more with documents and images. So
Mm,
that is coming very very soon here. And then the other thing, and if I look at here at this Workbench builder, or excuse me, this story builder tab. Right now, we have an AI action that includes just a prompt, right, where I can maybe generate some output. As we start looking, over the next few months at how agentic AI, interfaces with both traditional workflows as well as co-pilot chat workflows. This is going to evolve, and I'll leave the tease at
hmm.
saying that there's going to be more than just Workbench for sure over the next few months when it comes to AI.
Fantastic. And where can people find out about you? The website and everything?
Yeah, folks go to tines.com. They can find us there. And if they want to get a taste of all of this, what we've shown today, what we've talked about, we have a free community edition. It's free for life.
Mm.
It comes with a whole bunch of different features. I have my own community edition tenant that I actually use for personal stuff outside of work as well.
Mm.
We've had people use their Tines tenants to actually build to do a fantasy football draft, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, we want people to be able to experience what's what all we're building.
Very cool. Well, Matt, I enjoyed the conversation. I think this is super interesting and look forward to talking to you in the future.
Likewise, thanks so much, Daniel. Really appreciate the conversation.
All right, take care.
Cheers.